looks like.
Okay, there we go. Got it. Yeah.
Got it.
Perfect.
All right. Well, so I guess we start off with management meeting. And so this is if there are leftovers from Friday's meeting of things that everyone needs to discuss from a management context to get a go-ahead on things. I think Michelle had an item and maybe Quentin did.
Yes.
Do we want to just quickly flag what they are and then we'll come back to substantive discussion?
Yeah. I'm trying to remember if anybody
Yours was
remembers
about
mine.
validation language in DocAssemble.
Oh,
Right.
yes. The question was, so we've gotten various pieces of guidance, and Bryce was not here, has looked up like documentation on validation, error messages, and how friendly they are to users and how accessible and understandable, how to make them more so anyway. And the question is, do we just, try a bunch of stuff and do it for us? Do we just kind of take our best guesses and do it in our library? Do we take a bunch of guesses and push it upstream to DocAssemble? Do we do some testing on what we come up with, and one or the other, right? So my thought is, we'll dig into that later. Sorry. But that's the question is to do it for us or upstream user testing or some kind of analysis, feedback or something.
And Quentin, I remember you flagged something, but maybe it wasn't ripe.
I think we could talk about it now, so this is actually really good because it overlaps with our agenda items. And I think Lily has something too that we could get some broader input on, if we don't have other admin first questions. These are all kind of things like we talk about in our coding deep dive, and then we feel like, yep, we should also get input from other people because it's going to change things at broad enough level. It's not just how to do it. It's like, what should we do?
I actually have another thing when you're done.
Okay.
Or when you're done.
So mine was just how to filter the list taxonomy, I believe. That's definitely something I want to talk about today. And I could demo what it looks like with showing all 1,500 items, which is a lot, but it's
a lot. It's going to get bigger too, probably.
Okay. So yeah, that's the question.
Probably not all 1,500.
And the question is like, what do we cut off? How do we decide if we do secondary filtering? Where do we do it? And maybe folks will have some ideas when they see what it looks like and how I can style it as is. The only thing I will say is, I'll wait till I complete it actually. It's going to say something specific about how it works, which isn't necessary.
So we get validation, list labeling. Lily, it sounded like maybe you had something that would be appropriate at a management meeting level.
I'm not sure which one.
It was left over from last week, just showing off how we're going to try to embed the form title on every page. This was one of the recommendations from Theory and Principle.
Oh, yeah.
I think we might as well show it off to folks to get some broader input.
Okay, so integration of title. And then Caroline, anything you want to bring up or have us think
I
about?
just mentioned that we were going to talk about a separate meeting, this idea of Massachusetts, whether we can figure out a way apart from the big assembly line thing to do agency, how we can do agency forms. I think that was my thing,
I think that's
but that
larger,
doesn't fit into,
yeah, it's a larger steering about like what are the next forms we want to do and how do we want to do that. I had, when you brought that up, I brought up the fact that you're putting out these job listings. I talked to people who are filling those, and unless we can, which I guess leads into mine. There we go. Which is that they said, unless you have anything else going.
No, I think that was it. My only thing.
Which is that they're like, okay, cool, but there's not much time before January, so we probably can't fill them with like new slots. But if you have anyone that you want to hire, we can sort of slot them in. And so the question is, do we have anyone that we want to reach out to? Aubrey is not looking for a job right now in the spring. So I just wanted to.
Do you want to turn off the live streaming if we're going to talk about people for this position?
We may, but that's the,
Oh,
So
right,
maybe
this
we-
is just the agenda item,
yeah,
yeah.
just the agenda setting. So we then have 5 different little points. It sounds like
And-
the one about forms, we can sort of actually put a pin in that because that's going to be a larger discussion.
Mhm.
And then we have sort of these, we have sort of a personnel-ish type discussion, which maybe we hold till the end, because that might be when we want to stop the recording, if we want to talk about identifiable individuals. And then,
Lists and
and then we
validation.
have we have validation, list, and title.
And possibly how to approach the last
Oh,
thing
you had one
was
more.
how to approach the test setup stuff, because I'd like opinions of the folks in here, not necessarily a management thing, but the
Okay.
folks in here would be good to hear from.
Well, maybe it sounded like Lily and Quentin had things to show. So maybe we start with that. Lily, did you want to show, and then we'll have maybe we'll time box these discussions so that they don't go on forever. So we'll do a show and then talk 1 or 2 minutes and then reassess whether or not we want to keep having a conversation or wait till later and then repeat. Does that seem like a way forward? All right, Lily, do you have something to show us?
Yeah. Sure.
Title stuff. And if you could give us the context here, this came about from the theory and principle feedback, or independently, or
Right. So the main point is that right now when you run an interview from the assembly line, you don't get to see the title of your interview in the navigation bar on the top. And we need to add that one there. But right now the nav bar is already so crowded. And Quentin and I discussed on the channel. Basically, we're saying we're going to take out all those icons and the brand names, and we're going to combine them into a small one and then leave enough space for the interview title to get onto the nav bar. So what I'm going to show is how actually combined, what's the effect. But the assumption is that we're not going to show mass access or the text of court forms online. It's just one word quote forms online as the icon. So that's what you're going to see.
And I think Lily probably covered it already pretty well, but the idea from the theory and principle recommendation was that people wouldn't know what form they're on when they got to the page, right? Or especially if they, if you resumed an interview and you want to confirm you were on the right one, you were 3 screens in, there was no indication what form you're working on, unless you click the about button.
So, yeah. Oh, so can we just see is there a way we can see before and after?
Yeah, I can pull up one just as, or I can give you a link to one if you don't want to have to search for it, Lily. Maybe easier for you to keep doing the screen share.
Hey, Lily, are you doing a screen share?
No, I mean, I don't have a before right now.
Yeah, Quentin says, I think
I'll
he's
just
got
pull
the
up a link
before.
for you. I'm
Yeah.
going to give you like the one we've been using for all of our
Okay,
demos.
Quentin, you should have before.
Okay.
He's going to give us a,
Okay, I'll share it while you get it ready.
Oh,
on your
okay.
side.
Give me
So-
2 minutes. Right.
So here's what it looks like now, right? So we have this, we have our logo, we have the name Court Forms Online, then Mass Access. And you do see the description of the form. I think we call this the action title, which is quite long, but it's very descriptive. It's a bit long to fit here in the title, right?
yeah, right.
A little bit too long for that. And it also shows up on the About page. The different
About.
actions written differently. That's the name of the form. I
Where
forget
is
if
it show?
that's-
Oh, I see. But this is just the first page. Are you talking about throughout the whole interview?
Yes, and afterwards, after the.
But this is the
change, it will be
demo of what
filed.
it is now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but I'm just trying to understand what the
On the
It's
following
the
page,
idea.
there's
big
no
int-
clue what page you're
Yeah,
on.
there's no
unless you
Right.
click.
Yeah, right. Mhm.
So that's the
The idea
before.
is basically to take the court forms online area,
And put the
capture
title
that
in
real
there.
estate for title,
Right.
condense any branding such that it could coexist with it. That's the
And-
basic idea.
And then,
Yeah,
but the
and-
important thing is when we're looking at it, I think, is to show it from the smartphone view, not the desktop view, right? Because that's,
Yeah, we're going to show both views.
yeah.
So you have that ready, right, Lily, to
Yes.
show? Okay.
Okay, I'm going to share this one.
I'll see if I can find. They had like a really nice treatment in the theory and principle one for how they did it for Aleo with preserving their brand identity, but
So this is my interview title, and now it's up here on the bar, and that's the fake icon of our brand name.
Right.
And now if I do this to a mobile, now it wraps up into 2 lines, so it get plenty of
I like that.
space.
And we're changing the order of, right now it says, it has the title first and then court forms online, and then we're changing the order of it. So it says court forms online first and then the title. Yeah.
There was no title before, really, at least not in that space.
This is prior.
Yeah, here,
Prior-
right here. Right. This is what it was. What I'm saying is on the page, it's on the first page, we have the title in the question and then court forms online. And then the
Ah, yeah.
new version is court forms online : title, right?
Well,
That's one of-
that's a good question. That is something actually I experiment, but I don't know if anyone liked it. I mean, I don't. Maybe now it's time to give some feedback.
So
like this.
I do not feel that we need to overly, well, my general feeling is that I don't feel like we need to like put our brand front and center for everything, at least not as the default. If individual people who want to come in and customize for their own, have their own brand management or whatnot, that's one thing. But like if we have the icon up at top and we're in the about page, I feel like the brand is important primarily for 2 reasons, right? So like to have a brand out there that people know about and will seek out when they need something. And second, that it's a brand they trust. So like if we've already accomplished those 2 goals somewhere else, I don't feel like we need to put our name everywhere.
I think that's a good point. Maybe we don't need it here anymore because
Right,
it's already here and it's throughout the whole interview.
And it's on the first page, the
Well-
court forms online project.
Well, the court forms online in the header, that's just logos. So it will be
Right.
whatever logo we have. It will not actually be the
Yep.
text, correct?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Correct.
But we have been talking about having the logo, whatever it is. There's probably some visual icon representing our project that we need to come up with, but we also would want it to include the name Court Forms Online.
All right. So anyway, I'm not going to change anything on the page. The only thing I'm working on is this.
The
Yeah.
only feedback I had there was when then it shrunk down to phone view was a little more padding on the top there because it does out of the second line, right? So like that
Vertical space
paragraph
there.
break or div, yeah.
David, what if, I know we want to keep these short, but if you
Mhm.
take away that padding, will it break the header if the form is longer than 1 line, if it wraps?
Now,
You should be able to add a,
animal padding.
yeah, you can make it yeah. So to be clear, if that is, I don't know, is that in a paragraph? Is that in a div? But I'm talking about increasing the top margin as opposed to the line height.
Right.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but if you increase, because I thought you're really limited to what goes up there in the black space. So if you increase the top margin you're talking about not the court forms online, you're talking about, so there's more space between the logo and the text, right? So if you
Yeah.
increase the space there, does that mean that you can't wrap the white text because you're limited to how much space you
So-
have in that black bar?
So I think there is no-
Later, it's not.
It's just, that part is just CSS. The header doesn't limit you in any kind of number of pixels you can use. One of the problems we'll face is that we're starting to see a bit here is that we'll have to adjust other CSS so that the header doesn't cover what's below it.
Mhm.
Right, yeah, that's what I was asking.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not limited, but I remember there was an issue about the header being too big before and it was breaking stuff. So obviously if it's.
we decided
if it's
not to try to
covering what's
solve the other
below
CSS
it, yeah,
problems.
that's problematic, yeah.
I mean, what's interesting though is like this is with a pretty long title. I guess one question
Yeah.
is, I didn't remember that we already had been using another version of the title of the form that was stored in the interview because it's in the about page. I just noticed that when we did the when we did the petition to change name of adult. So that title. I mean, we have
Well, we have
Where's the
two
short
titles.
right?
We
Don't
have-
we have a title for phones and a title for desktop, right?
I don't think so.
thought we had
I
the
don't
call
think
to
we
action
actually
and we
actively
had
have
the
them,
title.
but we could.
I thought DocAssemble has that, so maybe we don't have that,
DocAssemble has that, but we don't.
but
we don't
we're not
create one.
using it. Okay, yeah, okay.
I think we call short title. I think we do have something called short title. Maybe we do. We should see
It
what the
might-
Weaver creates.
yeah.
We might have to like do a lot of refactoring on our
Mhm.
old interviews, but it's pretty small.
Yeah,
DocAssemble, this is what the DocAssemble does. It has a title and it displays when you are in a desktop mode. And the short title is just when you are in the mobile.
right. Right.
And now Jonathan just added a feature to let you have a short logo and a regular logo, which is the equivalent. It's just like when you change any part of the logo, it doesn't use the short title and long title anymore. You have to control it with short logo and long logo,
Oh,
but we can make it dynamic, which I don't think was possible
Lily,
2 years ago, but it is now.
I generally like it. I think we're now to the extent that it's a management discussion. I don't think a management discussion needs to get down to like the number of pixels.
no,
Um,
but that's an issue that it's taking over. Remember,
it's-
because we had this
it's-
problem with the escape button as well. Do you remember that?
Yep.
Yeah. But it sounds like I mean, no one said it explicitly, but it sounds like the answer is that we enforce a short title for mobile, which would avoid multiple line wrap, and that we can then, just balance the pixels to address the need of a single line, which would be both on the header itself and how the padding responds for underneath the header. So we would only have to have one, right? So like the padding for the overall page would change between when it was the mobile header, which was maybe a little taller than the desktop header, but there would only be the two states. There would be like the big view and then the small view.
Can I just had this idea because I think
Mhm.
if the title for most people are going to be using mobile to do these forms. I really like being able to have the first thing they see on the first page is ask the court to blah blah, which is quite long for a short title, particularly if it's something that we want, it's going to be on the black bar all the way through the interview. What if we put the actual form name in the header? Because really on the second page, we say, in order to ask the court to do this, you need to fill out this form. It's just that if it's a link from a launching page, you want the big question in black to match what it is they want to do. So the task is familiar, but then the form name is in the black because by the time they get to the second page, they'll understand that that's the form they need to do.
I think that's right. That's at least how I was conceiving of the short title as being basically the sort of the form name. as
Yeah,
opposed to our action title, which is the call to action, which is the first page.
right. But then you
Just
wouldn't
kinda-
lose the action. You'd still keep the action title even on smartphones.
Yeah, no, we never were talking
Right.
about removing
Oh,
the action
okay. All
title.
right. I thought
All
that
we-
the,
All we were
yeah,
talking
I'm
about
sorry, I
was
forgot. Right.
adding the short title or the form title or whatever it is we want to call it, for exactly
Yeah.
what you said, with the context of someone who comes in halfway
Yeah.
through an interview.
And
Okay.
we do ask for those three things in the Weaver now. We ask for title,
I'd
short title,
forgotten
for
that-
small screens.
Yeah. I'd forgotten that the first question on the first page is not the title. That's what was throwing me.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So
Okay, well,
Aleo
so-
had a treatment where it was like they were stacked, where like the brand was, like I said, their brand is Easy Form. So they have the Aleo logo on the left, and they have Easy Form, and then right underneath it, the name of the title. But I don't think we have to necessarily get that fancy.
Yeah.
The thing is about shrinking the text is you then make it so you can have a longer description for the title of the form.
It does seem to make it does seem to suggest at least that the logo should be sort of longer than it is tall, right? The fact that it's coming on two lines, right? That is at least something that's sort of suggestive. Instead.
Well, if it were shorter, could you not wrap it? Or would that be a problem? If the logo were, can't you, the size of the logo can determine where you put the title?
It could.
It determines how long the title is. I mean, it depends on how long the title is, because
Yeah,
if you
that's what
have a
she's saying,
short
depending.
logo and the title is longer than the allowed space, then it will still wrap, and then you'll have a short logo and a long title. But I don't know that that's terrible.
Yeah.
I
don't see
mean,
that.
there might be a way to combine them. I don't know how the
So what's
DOM
the
is being
what's-
manipulated.
what's the management nub of, to the extent that this is a management discussion, what is the question we need to answer?
I think we made some good choices today. We said we're going to get rid of the Court Forms Online, Court Forms Online from the intro screen. We're going to show the short version of the title in the title bar, navigation bar, when it's a small screen, and the long version in this long screen. And we're going to keep that like get a ... action oriented title in the first screen. So I think we have a pretty good path from here forward. We should consider like what logo we want to use still. I think that's important for us
Yeah,
to
'cause
decide.
that's gonna
'Cause
determine.
Yeah,
it feels like that should have, we have this little logo for, I mean, we could just type out Court Forms Online. Doesn't look great, but we could keep that in there instead of, and then keep our little state logo. But it's a confusing logo. We should probably come up with a new one.
yeah. A lot of people have not liked the Massachusetts logo.
And that's just for mass access. Like we probably should think about the experience for someone when they're not using Massachusetts.
Yeah, we should have a
as well.
generic Court Forms Online. I am
CFO.
fine with a bad placeholder over nothing. So
Yeah, probably just using the text as the choice.
I think
there.
that's sufficient for now, and improves on the existing, which lacks the context that the text provides. All right. So Lily, good work. It looks cool. I'm excited about seeing it implemented. Then we have the 2.5, 3 other things. Let's see if we can. I don't want to take up all of the deep dives time for other discussion.
We might only have one other agenda item. That's just pure coding, which is the test setup stuff. So I think, unless people have other things they were holding off on sharing wise.
So I think the ordering we had thought was we were doing screen shares first. I think implicitly under my assumption that screen shares meant there was something further along, but maybe there was, I mean, as I'm thinking about it, the validation could do a screen share too. So, but Quentin, you had something?
Yeah, let me just show you. All right, so this is what it looks like with all of the list categories. And so I've just played around a little bit with what I could do with styling to make it more usable. So I've given top level categories, heading 3 or 4, I can't remember which one, and then made the second level categories bold, and then just use spacing, padding to show other levels of the hierarchy. And then they're grouped in order. So that part's pretty successful, but there are 1,500
Yeah,
categories.
What What
and
about
you do get
a-
the
yeah.
search works here. So I have to change the icon so it displays that was a Bootstrap 5 compatibility issue. that I have to approve. So if I look for housing, this is interesting, right? Like, so there's a top level housing category. There's a number of other things that come up in earlier categories that are relevant.
Yeah.
Yeah,
there are
I'm
multiple
not sure how to
parents.
like make this
Um,
more salient to the type of head search, but
Does it
you
show
think
stuff
it
that's
should be.
under housing, but does not have the word housing in it?
It did. There was bad conditions or something.
You're talking about in the hierarchy, that is? No, it wouldn't. So if the word housing wasn't used here, it wouldn't show
Oh,
up
I
because this
thought I
is just
saw
a
it.
pretty straight filter.
Mhm.
It's just filtering for that in the description.
Right. I was just thinking that maybe if you put in housing, everything under the housing category should appear.
I mean, in general, I think it does because of the keywords that they used in those terms, but I don't think it's guaranteed.
Yeah,
So yeah, this is the full thing, right? Like you can't really scroll through and read all of these,
no.
but the terms are pretty descriptive. So I think the search is pretty accurate. So the challenge is like, you know, do you have to make people understand the hierarchy by clicking through multiple levels? Do you rely on the keyword search being pretty good? And then just show them words that pop up with the keyword, because I think be more specific and more accurate about what results their
So
tags they're giving it.
Can you
Here's
do
the-
accordions with this, or can you only just do check? I mean, can you expand and contract categories?
That
Or
would be nice. Yeah.
or the other thing is, I know they do it on census.gov, but you have a box and you pick whatever top category, and then the next box. In fact, I'm trying to think if Law Help Interactive does, but so basically you're limited to the number of things you have to look at in each category, and then you can dig down, but you've got several boxes. So for example, maybe the way you would do it here is your top level categories would be your top substantive areas. Then you'd have another box underneath. I mean, in terms of the way
yeah,
Doc
there are
Assemble would do
potentially
it.
4 subcategories within every.
If,
There are 20
if
top
I'm,
categories and 4 subcategories.
But it would
potentially within
limit
each.
it. It's like if you're in probate and family court, then you have a limit to how many courts it would be. So if your categories you picked, whichever ones of course, obviously you could pick more
Now,
than one, couldn't you?
Yeah, that's the interesting question, right? Because like potentially you can have coexisting
Yeah,
list items.
yeah.
And some of these are duplicated too, because it's
They have multiple parents.
it's
You have
not
the
a
same one
graph,
has
but
multiple
they have
parents.
multiple parents. Yeah. How does that work? Is it still one code when they have multiple
it
parents?
seems
One
to me
code,
like
yeah.
if you can search, then it's fine because you have to basically know what the name of it is anyway, right? Because if it were me searching, I wouldn't be able to go by top category because I wouldn't know what categories things were in. So if it's you lawyerly people, right, then you know what you're looking for, and you can just search for it by name and select it. Though I don't know what you do if there's multiples of the same one like this.
This
I
is
don't know if you
interesting.
select both of them.
David, what do you? So I think these are going to be the same taxonomy code, right?
Yeah, so I think what you're seeing there is you might be seeing it show up
Multiple parents.
based upon how you went through. You might be seeing it in both of its parents,
Yeah.
right?
That's what my guess
I
would
think
be
that's
too.
I think that's just how it was.
So if they're
explored.
duplicates, the answer is just ignore that. You don't have
Well-
selecting 2 will still only give you
Yeah,
one.
there should only be one
code.
code. So
Mhm.
But you can see it's only showing up here once too.
Yeah.
These are different parents or
Oh,
different
yeah.
items, so they're different.
So I guess what I'm saying is that if you're a lawyer and you already know the name of the things you want,
yeah, the thing is you're not
then you just
really
search
gonna
for
know.
it.
This is the like taxonomy problem is like they may or may not know the name, how they won't know
What-
the name they won't know the level of detail that's available.
What if you
Okay,
have
so
instead
they
of doing, yeah.
so doing the categories wouldn't work either, right?
So what if
Yeah.
instead of trying to do all the answers here, this is because I think this is unworkable, even with the search. But unless people know exactly what or have a good idea, what if you just had the taxonomy on a web page with accordions, and people could look at the whole thing on a different, you just link to another page to help people find what the term is. And then you could.
Seems like a
collapse and
recipe for no
expand.
one filling out the term.
You think so? Because they have to go to
We
another
could
page.
have it here. We could add that HTML in here if we
Yeah,
did
just,
some
yeah, I
work
shot
on
this
it.
list there. There's a search there that if you do the search, it sort of
Or
does
use
sort
an
of what you were talking about.
iframe. Or use an
Yeah.
iframe, right?
This is interesting that it shows the tag. So we could display that to help people understand. This doesn't seem like a very good search.
No.
No, it's just
I
sort
mean,
of
and the
there.
other thing is, when Michelle's talking about
Search
if
for
you were a
names.
lawyer, but law students aren't lawyers. And so they're not going to know what the names are. And
Okay.
right. So I think that
I was
that's
just trying
not-
to figure out if like we're
Yeah.
talking about who our audience was, right?
Yeah. I mean,
Well, let's say I wanted to do a name change just because that's the one we had up earlier.
Yeah.
I don't really know what category that would go in.
right.
Yeah,
But if you put
Even as an
if you put
attorney.
name change in the search, what do
It
you
does
get?
pop up
'Cause
then.
You just put in name, didn't you?
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that was actually the most relevant result was the right one.
Oh, right.
And but there's some that are just really irrelevant. So this does, I don't know why that was a result that popped up, except it's probably looking like an amendment and saying, okay, that's kind of a similar word to name. That's all I can
I
think
think
of.
it's really just, I think it's a
Native
key
Americans
research. It
sound
must
like
be in the
me.
description, something.
Doesn't look like it's in the description here.
I
For
think.
look, Native American hunting and fishing rights. This category covers special rights Native Americans have to hunt and fish in their own territory. and places.
It
The
has
word native
bugs.
doesn't appear anywhere,
So
Yeah, I don't know why I don't know how it's,
but it is kind of similar. Native American name,
Well, you got the NA in name and the AME.
right?
It might do a fuzzy find where it's giving you the most relevant stuff first and then like just fuzzy matches
it.
later.
Yeah.
That's my guess. Yeah. So, but yeah, I think there's a real problem with hierarchical search or taxonomies for like discovering which things you need. So I would worry
So I
about the
feel-
accordion for that reason, but also that same
Yeah.
thing applies to multiple pick lists, right? That appear after you pick the first level.
so there's like a certain like, so like there's the question, like let's pull back, like what's the motivating reason behind asking for these categories? And maybe that'll help us figure out what's needed. Like,
SEO.
yeah, so SEO and then like discoverability through other people using lists. So like the first most important thing is probably just those parent levels.
Right.
But if we take that name change example, like I don't know which parent I would get.
Yeah,
Let me
that's
look actually again
that's
and see what taxonomy, which
What
one
else would
was it?
that be besides family?
It could also be like an administrative court thing. I don't know, it might have.
Well, it had two parents. That's an interesting question. So let's see.
Yeah.
It was under family. That's the main parent, main category for sure. But it must be
If you click on it,
co-listed
it'll
as
say, yeah,
government services.
services, yeah.
No, it's pretty logical. I just wouldn't quite know where to start.
Yeah, I wouldn't know where to start.
But if
so
you
what we went
use the
just down
list,
one
then-
level, we could just go down to name or gender change and not go down to specific items.
That's true. We might not need to go
Would
down
have popped up.
all four. I'm not sure everything, goes down to all four. I mean, I know not everything does.
This one doesn't for sure.
what
Um,
about voucher? What happens if you put in voucher?
Well, okay, so relocating.
that's
the
weird.
federal
Oh,
voucher.
right. Yeah.
We can see from the zeros at the end, like how many levels deep we had to
How
go.
How
deep
far
it
down
is.
it is, yeah. So you're getting 3 levels before you get that in a housing context.
The first one isn't the
And
first
we
one?
can also
Private
provide
education,
a link
right?
to this tool as well, right? Like for people to look at more if they are interested in looking more.
I
But
think
the
SEO, I
actual
just want
tool,
to add in one other reason, which is maybe being able to
Find
do
the
more
forms.
sophisticated kind of work in the form itself when they've chosen a category, like showing suggested labels for things. But we probably shouldn't optimize for that because it's not something we're doing yet.
But it is definitely,
I'm just thinking about, from when I first started working on Mass Legal Help in 2000, whenever it was, 4. So I didn't know legal terms. I didn't know taxonomy, but I did use the tool for NMSI that was I understood, it worked. It was a series of boxes. And even on the Law Help Interactive, those
Okay.
work. I mean, it's tedious to add labels, but you've got to balance this. If you really want to add labels, then you have to make it more useful for people rather than just, I mean, I guess that, Quentin, you're not proposing that we have this long list. You're just thinking of other ways to do it.
So this is the NISME one. So it has a lot more categories. There's one issue though, right? It has.
Yeah, but it's easy to use. That's the
Yeah.
thing.
So suppose
But you still
someone
have
picked-
some of the same question, some of the same
Yeah.
issue, which is like, if I want something, how do I know which of these it's in? Which then means you have to read each of them, and then you have to.
Right.
Um,
But I mean, you can guess, right? You can guess in the context. And the other thing is that with the list, it doesn't matter how you get to it, that ultimately that topic shows up in more than one category. So all you have to do is find the topic you want and then count on list to put it in the correct. So if you find name change and you pick name change because it's a name change, then list takes care of the fact that it's in both government services and family,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So people can relax a little bit. They don't have to make sure they get name change in every place it occurs. As long as they have something that matches a term that's in list, then they don't have to worry about it, right?
Part of me keeps thinking of like column view on the old iTunes or in a like Finder on the Mac, where it's like, there's a scrolling column here of the 20, and then you select.
Yeah,
and
that's
then
what
you see the
that's what I was
scrolling column.
describing. Exactly. That's what I was describing before.
I will say, like, we're limited. So it took a long time to try to figure out one of these inputs that worked.
Yeah.
So we're a little limited in terms of what
Yeah.
would be easy to integrate with DocAssemble, but maybe not. If it's a one-off, we can just design our own input. The hard part is making it flexible to work
This
with.
at least seems better than nothing. Just, I don't know, from my layman's perspective,
I-
it gives me something to look at.
Yeah, I think the first creation is always the most difficult. Later
Yeah.
on, we can improve on it.
It-
Now, my question is, once you pick up a category, how is that variable used in the end of this interview?
Sure, it's a great question. So let's try. I think I can get through this pretty quickly to show you. It just gets put into the metadata. And
And then
Okay.
how is that used later
let's
on
load it
in the
1,500 things.
assembly line?
If it's in the metadata, then David's saying it's for SEO and discoverability, so that it just helps identify that interview. So if other, both Google can find the interview and other
I see.
programs, if they want to see what you're doing, they can find it. So it's not for the user, it's for developers essentially. Well, it's
Right.
for the users so that they can find the forms that are
Yes, it will
relevant.
help them find it.
Yeah,
And
it's
as Quentin said,
for
it might eventually help us
standards.
suggest questions or things or
oh, yes, right,
scaffolding
yeah,
for the user.
That's like a little theoretical, but yeah, it's
Yeah.
something we could do.
yeah.
Okay, so sorry, I had to redo this because this is too slow. That's actually a reason to maybe not show all 1,500. Maybe I'll just try with see how many it is when you just have the top three levels down or something, or I don't know.
How deep does it go, the list?
4 levels after the parent.
Geez, that's not
4
good.
levels after the parent.
Oh, maybe I didn't try
5
clicking
levels.
past this. I can continue. It seems to have showing an error.
I think you're going to have every one of the,
100.
Just
yeah.
go back.
So
Just
I
go
would
back.
refresh the page.
Just
I
go
would
Let's
back.
see if I can do that. Yeah, good call. Oh yeah, refreshing the page worked. Perfect. This is only just to show you that a list of items, which may not be that relevant. Okay, never mind. It's a different error that I just fixed that isn't in this branch. So it seems like search is maybe the only way to really make it useful that we've really consensus on, but also that having 1,500 to browse isn't really very useful for people to see.
Yeah.
I
If,
could have it be totally like, hey, we're going to show you results without letting you browse. It's another option.
Show results
Um,
without letting you browse.
You could also delay showing results until they've typed in at least 2 or 3 characters.
Yeah, it's like the regular Ajax input kind of search is what I was thinking. But then the problem with
Yeah,
that is, of course, like it is designed to only work with one selection. That one that I've seen
Well, so didn't we do this for the, we did this for the charge selections.
Right.
You know, that was multiple tags. You could add them. You just had to search each one individually.
Right.
Um,
Yeah,
as an
that's
interface, I thought that,
it's essentially the same as this. So I mean, we just did a little
Yeah.
bit more searching to find a better input than the one that we had been using on that.
yeah. I mean, I generally, I think it's yeah, some type of search that narrows it down. So if
Taxonomy
you-
searching is a little harder, I guess.
Yeah. I guess the thing is, maybe you want to, when you return the results, do you want to just return the most, do you want to return like the terminal results, the one furthest down the, down the
Oh, I see.
taxonomy?
Most specific, yeah.
I can't think of an efficient
Always
way to return
knowing
that in the
which
search.
results. Okay, so just you don't want to show 3 parents of the same item
Right.
Mm-hmm.
if you have the more specific one, but you want to have the most specific match.
Because you can
in a given
infer the
branch.
parents from the terminal result.
Right.
But also, it doesn't matter. I mean, if you get the
Yeah, well, that's the
terminal
point. It doesn't
result,
matter
it doesn't
because you
matter
infer it.
whether you infer it or not. It's there for other reasons, but you don't need to know it. You don't need to know it.
But you
what
don't only
category
want to
it's
look
in.
at the most terminal results when you generate it, right? Because if all the terminal results don't have the terms in it, but a parent of that has a term in it,
Yeah,
do
but
you
if you're
still want
typing
that?
your,
Yeah.
you
that's
don't want,
usually-
yeah.
Oh, I see what you're saying,
I
right? So
mean, the way I
maybe
was thinking of it is you.
If the word was like
actually you-
eviction of a household member, but then the top category was housing, like housing wouldn't pop up the terminal result. That's Michelle's point.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that would be fine if you wanted to be specific because you got specific. So you typed in multiple words. What you're trying to do is drill down to the most specific. If you just wanted housing, you'd type
But
housing.
you could take the most specific when you reach whatever terminus. I don't know how much control you have over.
We could make our own custom input. So, I mean, it's like a bunch of TypeScript that I don't really understand without spending a lot of time on it. But I mean, if we
could
have
take
our
a look.
ideal and we wanted to iterate on it, we could get there and say, okay, this is our input just for the Weaver that we're using. It's not going to be a general purpose input. I think we could probably customize it.
Okay.
It's just, it's good to know what our ideal state is and like where we're okay with getting
Yeah.
our interim, because we'll probably defer the ideal state for a while. But
I think we probably will. And for interim, I'm not sure that the best state for interim might not just be top level parents.
that's what we have now.
Yeah.
Maybe like, what if we did just like one level down below that, or
How
Well,
about,
we
I
could-
mean,
yeah,
the more you
see
do,
what
how
it's
about,
like.
first, just populate with 2 options. One is display the top parent. One is display everything. So for people who just want to see the big categories, then they only see the top ones, and then they can expand. But if they want to see everything in the beginning, then they can see, I want to see everything in the beginning. Just expand everything.
I did run into a limit where I couldn't hide it. And that's just because of some of the CSS rules. So I'm sure it's fixable, but DocAssemble's show if made it so that the input doesn't work. But that doesn't mean it's something we can't fix. Like it should be able to make them work together. We have to change the.
I mean, obviously, I know it's at the Weaver, it's at the very beginning, but the more detail that you can get, I mean, that's the whole point of the Weaver, right? Is you put as much in at first as you can. I suppose that might be a checklist item. By the time you get to the end, check the metadata to make sure you've got the correct.
Do we ask for the description before this of the form?
I don't remember, but we could. You want to try to use Spot there to figure
Try
out
it.
the category?
And then we could say, here are 5 things we think are in there. check the ones that actually are.
Mhm.
It's a good idea.
That is a really good idea. And I
Hopefully.
still think you ought to have the list to your taxonomy.legal or the other
Yeah,
one.
you
or
have to
just
link out so
not.
people can see the whole thing.
Yeah, so if they decide they want to do it another way, they can.
So
I
you
thought
could-
of another reason why we want this, which is way more specific, but we might want to map this onto like Tyler case types.
Mhm.
Does Tyler use their own taxonomy?
Yeah,
Kind of. It's kind of a taxonomy.
Yeah.
It's not hierarchical. They just have like a list of case types. And we want to also link this to, we want to be able to convert this to a number of different kinds of groupings of this kind of thing.
Yeah.
So there's the one that Sally is putting together too, which we were kind of thinking as a universal one for this, because there's a bunch of things for e-filing. We want to, it covers way more than list does. I do think list is the right taxonomy to use here in our Weaver as like people's first entry into it, but then we'll want to be able to map them to Sally taxonomy items and to Tyler stuff to say, hey, okay, this is the case type. We have to provide this when we e-file it. We can get pretty close. You'd need to let them fine tune it, but if we could get it pretty accurate up front, it would help us with that part.
so we could try to meet people halfway. We could get the titles and the description first, and then say, hey, we think, these things are there, yay or nay, and then provide a failover option, which is then, whatever you think is there, but we didn't show you, you can use the search or, add manually. And that, list Spot doesn't do as well with the children as I would like it to do, but that's just a matter of training data, which we're slowly amassing. So eventually we'll get there.
I think that's a really good place to start. I think the question is, how well are people going to be providing a description for their forms at the beginning? But if we have a place for them to start to copy that from, I do also tell my students to write the description. This semester, I had them write a whole outline for their project at the beginning, so that will help.
And you can also, you can motivate it by saying, hey, this description, I'm going to use this to try to figure out stuff. So the better you can do it now, the better off you'll, less work for you later on.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, tell them
Doesn't
what
have to
it's
be
gonna
long. It's probably too
achieve.
many
It's gonna
words.
find you. It's gonna
Yeah.
find you your categories. So put something useful in.
Well, I think that's a
Little bit
good
of
starting
motivation.
point. So I think we just probably, we're going to make the list smaller because it is too big. We could let people, what do we think? Should we let them type in the categories if they use their own, or still let them use that big list if they really want to?
I would, if possible, it'd be nice to confine it to the list items. Was that the question?
We wanted to show them the whole list item, whole list taxonomy to search from if it's not the main interaction they have with it. If it's like kind of a, hey, you want to customize it.
I like the filtered search. Right? Is that the question between like here's a drop down with everything as opposed to like you start to type and you get everything that matches?
So maybe we don't show them the list. We just let them start typing. That might help people.
Yeah.
And once they start typing, will they see?
I think it's
they
less
won't- Will they
overwhelming,
ever
right?
see the whole list, or they'll?
We'd have a
Will they
link
ever
out to something that says, here's the whole list. if you
I
wanna go
see.
find
Oh,
the
yeah,
names of
that's a
things.
really good idea. I think that makes
Um,
sense. So start typing. If you don't find what you want, here's the whole list. If you don't feel like it quite matches, that makes a lot of sense.
Because then the workflow would be basically, you've done a description. It's like, oh, this looks like we think there's housing and this and that. And you either check or uncheck. And then you're like, oh, but it's missing whatever. And then you just type whatever and say, oh, but here it is.
And if
And
it's
then-
not
Okay.
there, yeah, then you can go to the,
So don't try to show people everything. I think that probably will help make
Yeah.
it faster and easier to use. So that's a good idea. We will have the problem of duplicate results, but maybe we can filter.
how
There's
will you
no
get,
relevance to
dupli-
having
how you
duplicate
get,
results.
oh, you mean because you get, like you showed before with a different change?
Yeah. that's pretty easy to fix.
But you can let people know that sometimes the same thing will come up twice. They only need to click it once.
Yeah, well,
But
also
we're not
it's,
displaying it to them as a hierarchy. There's no
you
longer
can
any
dedupe
Right.
it, yeah.
adding duplicates.
Yeah, you just
Right.
dedupe it before.
Well, just let them, just let them know that it'll, sometimes they'll get more than one result for the same thing, but if they pick one, they don't have to pick both, because if they pick one, then they know, then that's it. I think that would be very helpful
Yeah.
for people.
I mean, it sounds like they won't even get to that. Since we're just showing them the refined list, we can sort of flatten the list and dedupe it. And you just get whatever you're typing. So you'd only see the one result. You want to get the two results. So,
Oh.
Quentin, that's what you were thinking?
That's what I was thinking.
do-
Yeah,
If you do name change, you won't see both.
you
No,
don't
you
see
just see
one.
name change.
Yeah,
Oh,
because
Name change is name change.
they're identical items inside the interview.
I see.
So
Gotcha.
okay.
I have two questions.
yeah.
Okay, first, is this a required field?
I think it is. I don't think you should be able to proceed without answering it. And maybe your answer is,
Family.
Yeah, maybe.
is there any
have to
form
pick
someone could do
something.
that doesn't match anything?
And secondly, where do you want to put it in the beginning or at the end of the interview? Because my thinking is that, okay, if we have some new people who are just start to use this, and the folks who want to get this interview built up, and you're asking them something they are not even familiar with in the beginning, then they start to struggle, and then they start to lose focus. But instead, if you put in the end, and then they feel, okay, I have accomplished a lot of things. Now you're asking me something, if it's toward the end, if I pick up something, then I regret it. So I want to change. I don't have to back all the way to the beginning. I can just only back up 1 or 2 screens, and I can change my answer there.
Yeah, I like your reasoning, Lily, but I also think we probably do still need to keep it at the beginning, because it is something we want to eventually use to try to improve the form. Like we might be able to say, okay,
Oh, these questions it'll trigger. But if you're doing it in the Weaver, oh, you mean it might even trigger some of the Weaver questions? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
If you pick that,
Maybe
then
one day.
maybe one
ultimately
day.
it might
So-
change the questions at the Weaver.
Oh, you said you're doing
Only-
eviction?
only for the
We have a
search.
model set of questions for eviction, you know?
Yeah,
We've been
So
talking
Um,
about using
I-
this as like a initial step in building a form. So in that case, it would be really helpful to be able to use that information to say
you,
what kind
you
of
know,
questions.
the other
Is this
side of
list
that,
International?
Not,
Canadian, English, it's English.
well, it's English. It's more about fact patterns than it is about specific areas of relief. But there are some US specific things that show up, like discussions, Section 8 vouchers sort of things.
Right.
The other reason for having it at the beginning and having it required is you actually don't want people who know nothing about the form to start building a form. You want people to read about the form, what it's used for, et cetera, et cetera. You want people to know what they're doing a little bit. So it's not just a form building exercise. And I think that's the thing that we keep going back to is, even with law students, they don't understand the context. They haven't read about it. They don't know what you actually use it for. And so they trip themselves up when they're actually building the form because they don't understand what they're supposed to be doing with it. So I think that's require that you understand what you're using the form for before you start building it. That's my,
So
Yeah, go ahead, Michelle.
I you know what, finish on that. And yeah, I think that's a good point. I just wanted to add another question, but continue.
that was just I was thinking more about what you were saying, Quentin, about it. I was thinking so often we get people who haven't read the information about the form. They don't know what it's used for, what the context is. And that really changes how you ask questions. And I
Yeah.
think people ought to know a little bit about what they're doing rather than just going straight at it. So that's my,
Yeah, if the goal is making the better form as opposed to making it the easier form, I think having some framing in the beginning helps with that.
And I
Um,
make my students read as explicit. They have to actually turn that in. I made it like a separate part of the grade this year.
yay for you, Quentin.
Yeah.
So again, if we if we just pull back out to what as a management, I want to like, we'll find what the balance is between every discussion being a deep dive, like a deep dive discussion, and every discussion being a management discussion, so that we can triage, so that some of those stuff can be, delegated. But to the extent there is a management question here, what is it that we need to ask, and are we there? And it sounded like Michelle actually maybe had one more clarifying question before we could ask the one I wanted.
Just that if they say it's not a US form, to not include it or not require it, because it might not be appropriate. And, we're making this more and more specific, and it used to be able to be used by just anyone. So
I still actually think a list would be generalizable to anyone, anywhere with legal problems. The problem is that when you have specific sort of in a broad sense, like everything's going to be either family or this or that or that. It's once you get down into the minutia when you might have specific differences. But for example, like the people in Australia who were doing their thing, their list, I think, is basically a subset of our list.
Okay, so as long as it doesn't limit you to just the specifics, so not only to the last, so then as long as you can pick general ones, then that's fine. But that might affect how we do our search. But that might affect how we do the search, because then it needs to not just do the most specific stuff.
It can be. You could put in family, and then you could just leave it.
I think the appropriate thing to do for Spot is to show the hierarchical presentation, because it might have hit something more specific than it thought, and really the thing that's appropriate is the thing above it. But I still think for the searching, the hitting the most specific makes sense, because you're going to be searching with something specifically in mind.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're going to hit for the specific.
Right, but if you are a different country and that specific thing does not apply to you, and you just want the general housing category,
then you would just you would be searching for housing, right? And if you were looking for a specific thing that wasn't there, then you would not find a result. There's not going to be a situation where you will, on a specific search, find yourself in a rabbit hole that you can't dig out of by.
That's what I thought we did describe before.
No, you can
That's what I
change
thought
the
we had
search term.
described.
You can change the search term.
I thought we were only going to show the terminal result, the most specific
the terminal result as it matches the search.
The search.
So if I type
but if
for
you don't show
eviction, I don't see housing and eviction, but I can still type housing.
It's what the search term is. So if you type in family or you type in probate, you'll get family or probate. You won't get name change. So if you can't find something that matches exactly what you want, you pick a higher category, and then you'll get a term in the higher category.
Sure.
That will be the terminal result for that.
So you do find a specific term do you also get that it's parent? Because
you don't need it. You don't need it
because of the way it's written.
Well, the reason I'm asking this is because I was thinking of what Michelle was saying. If it's an international form and the higher level term actually works for them, but the lower one doesn't. And when we show the result, if we show both the lower and higher, so even though, when they search for the higher, they will still find it. If we will only show the lower,
that's what we intend.
How it works here. So this series of numbers is this is one specific item I could click on. Let's see. And this goes all the way down. This is actually a perfect one. But then if I took off those last digits and replaced them with zeros, it would bring me up a level in the hierarchy. So the actual number that you get, the tag, includes the whole path to the bottom item.
So let me just really quickly, to make sure I have this clearly described, we have this scenario clearly described. I type in housing, it digs down to housing voucher section 8, housing blah, 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 blah. But it doesn't have just housing.
No, just
if you type housing, all you get is housing.
Right.
All you get is housing.
Or anything that has housing.
So you won't get any of the subcategories? You won't get any of the specific ones?
Well, you would if they had housing in the keyword.
It would.
Well, that's okay, but you will get ones that just have, you'll get a thing that just has housing.
As well.
Yeah.
Then that's
the point
fine.
is, if you type eviction, You don't also
Sure,
get housing.
sure,
You just get
for
eviction.
sure.
So that's the distinction. Is we don't reveal something that's apparent of that specific
It
term
doesn't
unless
have
that
that.
name is in
Mhm.
the.
And there's like a filtering step we could take there, which is I don't know how easily we'll integrate that. So like most of the time, it's like if the keyword matches, you'll show it. But maybe we could also cut out like the redundant paths. Like so if someone has something 5 levels down and it matches 3 times in one path, then we don't show the 2 above the path. We just show the most specific match
Specific.
for that very specific branch.
I feel like that's like the items with multiple parents are indeed a minority in the list, and I think for a first pass through here, something that's just the autocomplete search works pretty well. Because remember, we're not talking about it in isolation. We're talking about it as the supplement after the fact if the thing you want it to be isn't in that first automated list, right? So the idea is Spot takes a first pass at it and says, we think these 5 things might be there, check or uncheck as needed. And then if there's something that wasn't there, then you do a search. So it's not the get you everything there. It's the failover state of not having picked it up through the context of your description.
That sounds good.
I think I have a lot to work on to improve this now. This is good to do. So we'll see what we can get in, but it was good. Definitely a lot of good ideas.
Yeah.
I've written them all down. So
Yeah, and the Spot integration should be pretty easy. If you have any questions about that, let me know. We should just be able to.
yeah, I probably will.
Probably,
and we'll have to add it to the
probably-
installer too, I guess, to say get an API
Yeah.
key. But for the Weaver low volume, it's probably not an issue, right? How many?
It won't be an
when do you
issue at
start
all.
getting rate limited?
you get it rate limited like 15 a minute or something. But the point is like,
we're okay.
but I'll just once we know who it is, I'll up the permission. Just it's also nice to know because the separate API keys we can track the usage and stuff. So
Yeah, no, I was just trying to think about like if we're going to have installation instructions, should we tell people get a Spot API key? But it probably isn't necessary.
well, you do
Sure.
need I do think you need the API. Well, I know
Oh,
you need the API key to make a call. So
okay. There's no anonymous calls. You just have to
no, there's
do
no
a different
anonymous
kind of
calls.
call once you've gotten approved, essentially.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Sorry, that's way
Yeah.
too detailed. Sorry, but yep, that's good to. I'll start thinking
Yes, you
about
do
that,
need
and
an
then I'll
API.
think about like where to do the installation.
Okay, cool. Now, we're way over what would have been the normal management time, but let's have a discussion of. So we had the validation. What was it? I'm sorry. Remind me what the second one was, Michelle.
Test setup. stuff.
I'm testing
Testing.
using the API key.
Let's see if we can.
Test setup using API key.
Yeah.
We can do that one another time. That's
All right.
definitely not.
Let's talk about validation then. Here, really, the question is whether or not we should do something on ourselves, or whether or not we should try to do something further upstream. Is that really the question?
Well, yes, but if we were to do something upstream also, the question is, should we just do something off the cuff, or should we actually do something that has some like testing or input from plain language people or whatever, so that we're doing something that's not just another guess at what would be good validation messages?
We have some more experience with the validation messages. Thoughts? This is coming out of feedback as well from 3 in Principle and other.
They thought our error messages were a bit harsh, essentially.
A little terse.
And some of them were actually custom error messages that either New Hampshire or Illinois used. They weren't ones we'd written the assembly line or that were docassemble native. Some of them were docassemble native.
So when we talked about this on Friday, I told Bryce I would give him the contact information for Luke Robluski or whatever his name is. I just put that into Teams this morning. So that might be he might be a good person to try and track down and see. I mean, it might be on his website. But that might be he's like the web forms guru. So he might have some good suggestions based on research, because he's the other thing about what he says, which I think is really interesting. He says, just because Amazon does it or Google does it doesn't mean it's the right thing to do, which I thought was really bold and interesting. Because you do want to count on people doing it the right way, and you think they put all this they invest in all this usability stuff. But I thought that was really interesting when he said that. So I haven't looked on his site for validation messages, but I think it would be a good idea to get in touch with him when we either look at his stuff or get in touch with him. And I put that in the admin channel for us. So if anybody wants to chase that up, apart from Bryce, they can.
One of the things that immediately pops to mind for me is we're talking about some of these were custom error messages, that there should be at least something addressing the writing of error messages in the style guide.
Good point.
Yep.
So, don't be terse.
Be nice.
Be charitable in assumptions.
Well, I mean, it's stuff like don't write "you need," which isn't terse or uncharitable. People would not think of that as such, but it is kind of accusatory.
Well, you could say we need. We could say we need, not you need. We need.
I mean, the debate about the language, that's what we want to know. That's the question. Do we want to?
Right. That's what I know, but that's what I'm. That's exactly what I'm saying.
Just clarifying. I was just clarifying about the
that it exists. Yeah.
Right. The general sense is that we need to give some advice on tone, effectively.
That's a great idea. Of course, that's like once you say it, of course it should be in the style.
We can make our own words.yaml for people to include somewhere that contains
for validations.
And that was one proposal. And another is to push it upstream to doc assembles words. And another is to, before pushing it upstream to doc assemble, do some
testing,
footwork and testing, and get input, so that it isn't just based on our guesses as to what would be
we're talking about.
nice. Yeah. So like in our guidelines, similarly, are we going to put up guidelines that are backed by research or testing, or do we just do kind of the best we can do now and just say so, And
there may be websites, for example, MailChimp, right there. They do a lot of forms. They have a style guide. I mean, we might look a little bit and see who else has validations in their style guide, and then get in touch with them and ask them. I mean, I would start with
the question. The question is less how do we do that, because we can figure that out. The question is, are we going to do that, or are we just going to?
Oh, I thought we
do our best.
Well, now there are two threshold questions that Michelle brought up, which is this something we should be handling, or should we be pushing it upstream to Jonathan to handle?
No. Should we handle it and then push the changes onto the repository upstream so that we handle it, but we provide it to DocAssemble as an option for a change? Not should we ask Jonathan to do the research, right?
Right.
Well, then, yes. And then the next question is, how does that content get created? And I just want to remind folks that, our best guess, being our collectively of the community, is not a experience-less or data-less. It's not an uninformed decision. I just want to also remind us that we do not have to focus group every. Yes.
But it could be just me in my room, or it could be us collectively looking at it and doing it as a group, which is more informed. And there's different levels of this. Yeah,
there are different levels, and I just want to I wanted to avoid the dichotomy of we're doing it or we have to somehow externally validate it. I didn't want to make that a false dichotomy. I don't know. My first thought is that we do have some unique validation, and like question types that we've built in the AL docs. And so to some extent, we're always going to have things that are in addition to what is there for DocAssemble, which I don't know, does that argue for the notion that we should have if we're always going to have to keep some of this standalone, does that mean we should think about doing our efforts just to have standalone stuff, which is like the AL docs error validation messages? We also have a different population audience, presumably, than all of DocAssemble. So we could do work, and we could take that and we could make that stuff available for Jonathan for upstream. But the reality is we will probably still then need to do a lot of maintenance on that. I don't know, Quentin, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that we were considering with the value of having it upstream is translation too, because we talked about that a bit. I don't remember if it was on the management call on Friday or not, but if we have our own custom strings that we use in our own words.yaml file, when someone wants to go to translate them to their language, they won't see our custom strings. They'll see the DocAssemble default ones and might be confused about what message they're translating, because we've already translated essentially from English to better English when they try to do it, and they're looking at the better English, they won't see it matched up in the DocAssemble side. So that could be confusing to folks, especially because there's no real context clues in the DocAssemble translation file. But I think you're right that we're never going to totally solve the custom strings issue. We'll always have some. So
Yeah, I
getting
think
it right in a style guide, I think is going to be important.
I also think it's a question about, like, I mean, good to consider the improvement for the community that they will have, that everyone will have better validation messages if we do that work, right?
On top of that, when you say we have different audiences, so often it's true we have different audiences, but the more sophisticated audiences don't tend to mind the gentler, nicer, kinder validation message. It's not
No.
problematic for them to use the validation messages that we would use for our audiences.
I think it's
Whereas it would be
about,
problematic the other way around.
education, because like everyone is saying, like, since this is we're talking about customized messages, when people fill out their interviews, they add their own messages. That's a common practice. It's very difficult to say, okay, everyone, you have to go through this specific door in order to output your message. Instead, we show people how to create a user-friendly message. That solves the bottom line. We don't have to chase after them, because they take responsibility for their own interview, for their users, right? But if we in our like AL or DocAssemble, the backend system is producing some messages, yes, that's our responsibility. We need to improve that, or Jonathan improve his. But
I think that's what we're talking about.
yeah, but then
Yeah, so I mean,
that's why I'm not clear as to about the translation and all that, because to me that means we are going to have some kind of library and say you go through this tool, then you get these messages, and then we control the quality of the messages. But
well, do
that's
we even
what
have
I
a
think.
notion as to how? I'm sorry, Larry. Continue, please. Sorry, Lily. Continue, please.
No, I think that's basically my point is that, okay, if we created through the backend, we modify them. If it's people's own customized message for their particular interview, we educate them how to create it, but they don't. That way, they take responsibility. We don't have to chase after them and forever maintain some kind of library tools.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a really good concrete thing we can do, which is to start with the style guide, like what do we want it to be? So it's not going to just be research, it's going to be writing it down with our own congested summary of things. So yeah, I'm excited about starting to think about that. I mean, given how much emphasis we're thinking there's going to be on having our own better styles and our own better specific messages that we have, then it seems like there's no real harm in just submitting the ones that we improve that are upstream to upstream as soon as we get something a little bit better. It sounds like that's an answer to what
And
your
then we're
question
always
was,
gonna have
Michelle.
to
Like
maintain.
just do our better ones as soon as we think they're better than what's there, and we'll be ready to keep changing it even if DocAssemble doesn't accept them. Is that accurate summary of what people kind of think? We prioritize our own and just submit what we can upstream?
I don't necessarily, because I think, I mean, it depends how we do it. If we do it as a words.yaml, if we do it on the left side of the object or the right side of the object, because if we change the left side of the object, then
We can't change.
we also need to update translations that Jonathan has and stuff, right? So like it's more work, like it's more of an investment of time we have to put in it. So I'm not sure. They're just popping it up. Like if we only change the right side, okay. But if we're changing the left side, then it's a a major change that all the translations need to be updated and I mean, people won't be able to use their words.yaml anymore, right?
It doesn't break their words.yaml, but it does break those specific translations. So
Or conversions, if you'd like, for the English version that they came up with.
but Jonathan changes those strings pretty regularly. So like maintaining your translations file is an ongoing task people have.
Mm.
So I don't know that it would make sense or be required or expected that when we update it, the English version, that we also update the translation files. Those are all user contributed. Jonathan doesn't maintain those. I hear what you're saying. But it would be a nice thing if it were more internationalized, maintained upstream, but that's just not how it's worked in DocAssemble historically. So we wouldn't be changing that by not updating them.
Okay.
So it sounds like we have a couple of clear action items and then some additional questions after that. And the clear action items are add something, start thinking about this in a way that we can add it to the style guide, implement locally when we can, and then to the extent that we have something better, as Quinn says, then we can suggest it for upstream. But again, there's also this big question as to whether or not upstream will accept our changes or do so in a timetable that means anything to us. So I think we've got to plan as if like they won't accept the changes, but it would be nice if they did, because we don't have control over that. That being said, we're almost to the end of the time for the normal deep dive meeting, which is to say we ran just about an hour over the budgeted time for the management meeting. So I think one thing we might want to think about is doing what we did in the beginning, which was go through, talk about all issues. And I think we should do some triage that prioritize things that need an immediate decision as opposed to like, or a near-term decision as opposed to a long-term decision. And then we can discuss and, like come to consensus on, or, a decision on, say, okay, here are the 5 things. Let's deal with this one today. And then we deal with that one. And then we know the other ones will be queued up for when we go around for that. And it will mean we won't get to everything every week, but I don't think that will put us in a worse position than we were in any of our other meeting configurations. And I want to be considerate of people's time. Does that sound like a good strategy?
Do you mind
But
summarizing?
that being said,
Sorry.
we made some decisions.
Yeah.
We
So
made
I
a
think
lot of
this was
decisions.
pretty typical of like what we would normally do on a coding deep dive. I think just the difference is we had more validation from the whole team on some of the choices.
Yeah.
We did skip some of the really more technical things. So I don't know if we did kind of lose that. And we lost the chance to rehearse some of these questions before they needed input from everybody. But I think it worked to me.
Yeah, I think it worked aside from the I do think that like an hour and a half, like
Hour and a half is too long. Yeah.
we were trying to replace a 30-minute meeting with another 30-minute meeting. Because that's what we used to have when we had, you know, Tactical Tuesdays. We had a 30-minute meeting that sometimes ran a little over, but it never ran an hour over because it was always, but you know, tail ended by the Teaching Tuesday. So like, I want to avoid like the, you know, whatever rule of meetings it is, we'll expand like a gas to fill the available space.
But David, do you think that part of this is I mean, I haven't been around all summer, but do you think part of it is accumulation of trying to push Tuesday's meeting to Friday and that kind of stuff?
Well, that's why we moved this here, but I don't think there's any reason why. I think if this had been in the normal Tuesday meeting configuration, we would have just dealt with one of these things at a management meeting, and then the other ones would have come along later.
I just thought because we haven't had management meetings in a long time that they just things build
Well,
up, accumulate.
We've
But
been
I wasn't
I
here,
think
so-
we have been having management meetings. The problem
Okay,
is that
that's me then.
they were encroaching upon the stand-up meetings, and
I see.
I think we just happen to have a lot of issues at the
Yeah.
same time come up in this
Just
particular
twinky
one.
dink. Yeah.
Yeah.
we just need to have I just think we'll have a commitment to
Keeping it shorter.
yeah,
Do that. Yeah.
because
It
I
does
want
mean-
Caroline, I want you to be able to hop off if you need to hop off, and selfishly I need to hop off when I need to hop off. So
It does mean like
And
we
it-
might lose that
yeah.
ability to have rehearsed stuff at the coding meeting before it comes to bigger discussion. But I guess
Although
maybe
it does-
sometimes there are things we just wait.
doesn't
till
have
next
to
week
mean that.
decide.
doesn't have to mean that,
But
because that
ordering
discussion could happen
question,
after the
yeah,
fact. Yeah.
But yeah. Okay. so
Not
yeah,
sure
so
that'll
right,
work
'cause we
as
could-
well, but it's also possible that we won't bring up stuff on Monday and then on Friday and then rehearse the stuff and then maybe bring up something on Friday that we've rehearsed on Monday. Like it,
That's nice. Or we
like,
can you can just be
we
the
can
next
push
week
it
at the
off
beginning
to
of
the-
Monday.
Yeah, exactly. So we can set aside unrehearsed stuff for a future meeting.
We just won't make that the stuff we lead with on Mondays when we do the management announcement.
I think that makes
Um,
sense. Yeah, so we could just have it be not as open-ended questions. Maybe that would be a way to get there too. Just have it be like more like what our other management meetings were before.
Right. It's like it should come with maybe not open-ended questions, but questions that need a management decision. Right. What is that we as a group need to be able to decide? As opposed to what is it we need to talk about?
Right.
But no, I think it was a good meeting. I think we got great action items and we got good input on the stuff while we did it. I just know that there was another thing that you said was on the agenda, and we didn't get to that, and it is after the end of what normally would be the meeting time.
All right, so I think so our choice is we're going to stick with the half hour at the beginning of Mondays, but just have it really be a real half hour. That's right. Just wanna
Yeah.
make sure I did